Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, my name is Mihong Jung. I am very honored and grateful for the opportunity to speak about what has happened in Korea over past 9 months, which when it started, the news report about the scandals of the President Park's government. It truly is one of the most unbelievable stories in the world today. And probably most of the Western people cannot understand completely. It has forced many of us formerly leading quiet lives to speak out repeatedly and forcefully in an attempt to correct the fundamental wrongs that have been committed. We are still, as yet, a lonely voice, but it is a voice which I am quite sure history will judge as being true and accurate. And I'm very delighted to tell you about the story today. I'm covering the media's role in the impeachment process. As you already were told by Mr. Chang, it was not really the impeachment, it was firing the president illegally. Anyway, I titled it Instigation of the Public by Media Outlets, and I will speak briefly about the May 9th election, which is claimed to be fraud. And let me deliver my speech. What really happened in South Korea is instigation of the public by media outlets. South Korea has suffered serious damages from the impeachment of President Park Geun-hye. Many people have been shocked by the scandalous events of the past 8 months. But what really happened? What really happened? Is it just a simple factual event that ultimately led to the impeachment of the president, which empowered Moon Jae-in to rise to the presidency? We think not. Rather, I believe that within the country there is a movement to completely change the very nature of the Korean constitution and the nation built upon it. Actually, it is a very risky moment in the history of the country. In a broad sense, there seems to be a movement to convert the existing liberal democracy into socialistic system through constitutional amendments. Such attempts will only serve to fix the current division of the Korean peninsula. The attempt to fix the division of the peninsula can be viewed as not only recognizing the legitimacy of the North Korean regime, but also an attempt to implement a plan to establish a national federal unification under a two-state system that allows the coexistence of communism and democracy. Their effort has been started since Kim Dae-jung government to make this system. Ultimately, this will lead to one nation of North Korean-style communism in the peninsula. The current constitution of the Republic of Korea does not recognize North Korea as a state, but defines it as a territory that should be recaptured. Therefore, the recognition of two nations on the peninsula, in fact, equates to surrendering national territory acknowledged by the Constitution. So now, literally the Moon Jae-in, new president, trying to do something that is against the Constitution. This national federal unification system that the Moon government is trying to build is absolutely unconstitutional, as the law of the land recognizes only a single form of government in peninsula. recognition of North Korea as a real government only can be done via constitutional amendment. Such an amendment would be nothing short of treason. But President Moon announced that he is going to try to amend the constitution next June along with the local government elections. A key mission of conservative sides in Korea today is to prevent that for the sake of maintaining the integrity of our current constitution and the country. A fundamental change in our national system means, in narrow sense, denouncing the United States as an ally in our free market economy. This change also focuses on breaking the triangle tie between Republic of Korea, Japan, and the United States, which has been the basis of diplomatic relationships of the Republic of Korea since the end of the Korean War. These unthinkable acts are actually happening in Korea at this time. It is critical to understand that at the forefront of the attempts to change the very essence of the nation is a series of recent instigations of the public by media. There is a reason why conservative figures in the South call what has happened to former President Park Geun-hye a media coup, or also as Pressgate. This term derived from the famous Watergate scandal. The fact that a majority of conservative intellectuals in the South are calling the impeachment of President Park a media coup clearly shows how media outlets manipulated public opinions toward their own ends. The media coup during the impeachment period can rightly be viewed as a gate of national change. In this report, Pressgate is considered as the point at which the change of the national system was ignited. The nature of Pressgate. What is the nature of the Pressgate? Pressgate, which is at the core of recent events in Korea, can be explained by three key elements. The first is the ideological orientation of the Korean media. The second is the demagogic competition between individual journalists. And the third is the excessive competition among the media businesses in an already crowded market. Let me explain in detail one by one. First, let's look at the ideological direction of the media. We should also look at the basic ideology which underpins Pressgate and the political topography of the Korean media. The traditional way of distinguishing media is through newspapers and broadcasting. But these days, portal sites and many online medias must be regarded as important media affecting the national political dialogue. During the authoritarian regimes, Korean media had a pro-government and conservative tone in general. In the case of newspapers, if the number of media with conservative tone was about 70%, the remaining 30% was either neutral or slightly progressive. The three largest newspaper agencies in Korea are the Joseon, 동아, and 중앙일보. All three represent a conservative view, and they practically owned the newspaper market among themselves in terms of circulation. Until late 1980s, when the 한겨레 newspaper, which is considered a beacon of extreme leftists, was launched, there was no leftist or progressive media in Korea. Today, most newspapers, including the three major media groups that I mentioned, and literally all of the broadcasting networks are considered as leftist. There are several reasons why this happened. First, the second and the third generation of the owners of those media groups, which the new generation of journalists is mostly leftist due to the big trend of 주체 idea, which swept South Korean universities in the 90s. 주체 is the fundamental ideology of North Korea, which dictates that self-reliance is the only way for a country to move forward. Receipt of any outside assistance will only lead to a compromise in national goals. So this thing somehow, the domestic, self-risen socialists among university students, this ideology swept them, and really hundreds of thousands of students at that moment was the followers for this 주체 ideology. And those young generations now have become the key workers of the medias and every sectors of society. And this leftist ideology among Korean journalists is also the result of the North Korean spies and the pro-North Koreans' activities to change the regime of South Korea. I missed the one line because the second and the third generation of the owner group of the media, owners of the media groups, don't have the philosophy or ideology as strong as their parents and the grandparents now. It is well-known fact that the North Korea has consistently maneuvered behind the scenes through their spies to use labor unions to materially impact the educational, legal, and media sectors of South Korean society. It is no accident that the most radical and violent unions in the country are the teachers' union and press union. Secondly, let's examine the aggressive competition between individual journalists to report more and more sensational news on a daily basis. The public incitement by the press can be said to have originated from their basic ideological orientation. But compounding this is the fact that they are in competition for news material for pure sensationalism and incitement. It is seen as the only way they can survive. Incitement competition by sensational reports inevitably leads to misinformation. How can misinformation or fake news be criticized, or how can journalists point fingers at their very own accomplices in making up the news? The fact of the matter is that they must remain silent about their actions. The impeachment last year was possible due to years of deep-rooted left-wing activities in South Korean society. Many Korean leftist intellectuals contributed to the impeachment. And I also think it is caused by the great fear of the pro-North Korean who is acting in South Korea, and the Kim Jong-un regime itself about the actions of President Park. Because President Park has a very strong tie with the US and Japan to change the Kim Jong-un regime to clean the, nuclear weapon, demilitarize the nuclear weapons. However, the immediate cause of it was reports of political scandals about the Park administration by Joseon Media and JTBC, which literally started the Pressgate. JTBC, which is one of the stations, TV stations, triggered the well-documented candle rallies with its tablet PC reports, which under scrutiny has turned out to be a completely false story. the so-called accomplice of President Park not only, 최순실, not only did not have speeches of President Park on a tablet PC that she helped write, she never even owned a tablet PC, and in fact was basically an illiterate when it came to digital technology. But this report said that he controls, he changes the president's official speeches, and that really make people angry about the presidents, and then the candlelight rallies starts the normal people and join the candlelights. But this false reporting was seized upon by leftist labor unions and organizations after the news was reported. The candle rally started by lefty labor unions and organizations after the news. The Joseon media then reported about the former secretary of President Park. Both the JTBC and Joseon reports turned out to be false stories, but in the unrelenting media hysteria surrounding the initial reports, there was never any criticism or apology. There was a story on internet that about 80 different false stories and fake news was reported by all the media. Literally 100% of the Korean media is talking about only the scandals. They didn't care that which was true or false. They just create this sensational news every day. And there was a joke that even the Jesus Christ would become a criminal if, months of these false stories keep saying the same thing. They were simply accepted as being true. No media has apologized about their fake stories, even though it turned out to be false stories. Or they never changed they never report about what is the real stories. In addition to the initial wrongdoing of the media, misinformation from numerous sources was mass-produced into news reports in order to incite the public to overthrow conservative regime. The entire media quickly reached a boiling point as the public was misinformed by completely false report of current events. When mass media learned that they could treat President Park in literally any way they wanted, and people responded to that, they began to show a kind of violence in writing, broadcasting that went further and further down this road. The situation then became an intense competition for more incitement. The situation became a game of not reporting facts, but competing to determine who could report the wildest claims of fraud and corruption, which was not true, too. The mass production of fake news and false reporting of events by the media were based on an assumption that they could engage in these acts and not be held accountable to anyone. They could completely get away with it. Of course, some media were not ideologically biased, but they were engaged in this intense competition for more sensational reporting and not even knowing that the true meaning and purpose was, in fact, to overthrow the conservative South Korean government. The behavior of the media during the impeachment of President Park left an indelible and ugly mark on this profession in Korea. The fundamentally low quality of journalism will continue to prevent the Republic of Korea from becoming a truly developed nation under the rule of law. The third factor we should consider is the intense competition between media groups. According to a survey by the Korea Press Foundation, more than 1,300 newspapers, over 50 broadcasting companies, and over 1,700 internet newspapers are registered in Korea. These are amazing numbers considering the size of the country. There are more than 1,000 journalists assigned to the National Assembly, and Samsung, a private company, records more than 1,000 reporters visiting them daily. Samsung is a target of left medias. They try to discard, literally, the Union Party, which was dismissed by the President Park's the government. One of their promise to public was to divide Samsung Group into 3,000 small companies. That's their promise. That's their policy. Excessive competition for coverage and first to report are an absolute key to survival. Almost anyone can disseminate news through portal sites. Portal sites also play the unfortunate role of publicizing all of these unverified corruption and impeachment stories for commercial profit. In the end, the reports turned increasingly harsh to lure readers and listeners who sought more and more sensational news every day. Given this reality, it was almost inevitable that even mainstream media followed the direction of low-quality journals. This is a fundamental cause of the current media crisis in Korea. Criticism through mass media is a necessary tool for a society to cleanse itself. However, false criticism, which uses fake or untrue facts to attack people, has the effect of leading public opinion in the wrong direction, which in this case, leftist opportunists used to overthrow our government. In conclusion, in Korea, a de facto coup instigated by a hungry and overly leftist media overthrew existing and democratically elected governments. As I mentioned, the purpose of this coup is to change the very essence of Korea into a two-state system of communism and democracy through constitutional amendment. Pressgate played a key role in toppling the former government due to ideological orientation, aggressive competition for sensational reporting, and excessive competition among media businesses in an already crowded market. The normalization of Korean media should be a key goal in bringing justice and democracy back to the country. A fundamental method to do so must be found. That must be one of the most important goals for the Korean people who want their country to be an advanced country with democracy, justice, and steadfast adherence to the rule of law. Thank you very much. And I will quickly, briefly explain to you about the election, and which is now under litigation. It's three groups of the people sue the government about election fraud, and thousands of people became the accusers. So I have to explain to you the basic information about what is going on, and because some of the people, the audiences here, probably vote in the last election. Until all fraud is fully investigated, I think Moon Jae-in should not be recognized as the president. The leftists in South Korea call the recent president election the Rose presidential election. Over the course of 7 months, they mobilized a candlelight protest against Park Geun-hye, and by May 9th, 2017, accelerated the election outcome by 6 months. because Korean roses bloom in May, hence the nickname the Rose Presidential Election. But on the other hand, conservatives call the May presidential election a fake presidential election because it stems from the improper impeachment of President Park Geun-hye and potentially fraudulent voting process. Before we review the process of election, there are very unique and doubtful voting systems that must be examined in Korea. First, Korea has used the electronic program and the machine which divides the candidates on the ballot. It was used since 2002 when President Roh Moo-hyun was elected. This program has been criticized severely because of its inaccuracy and possibility of manipulation. Also, it is very uneconomical and inefficient to use this program. Even the Philippine government tried to import this system from Korea, but they gave up after testing the program. But the Election Commission in Korea somehow adhered to this system and ignored all of the problems. The second voting system in Korea is by the law, which was established by the National Assembly, all ballots are burned 1 month after each election. This is very different from the election management system in most countries in the world. Generally, in anticipation of objection to the result of the election, ballots are kept at least for some years after election. But Korea, and nobody knows exactly when it started, but it was passed, the law has passed from the Congress and in lefty governments. Coincidentally, these two systems were established during the period of leftist governments. These two factors made the Korean election problematic, and it only heightened the chance of voter fraud. In addition, the process by which ballots are opened in very loose, which created controversy in nearly every polling station where votes were being counted. This happened in the May 9th presidential election, and many citizens who participated in the process testified about they have seen. In sum, the issues of the May 9th presidential elections are: first, the two different types of ballots. Tens of thousands of people have testified through their social network or YouTube channel that they voted with different kinds of ballots, which the Election Commission denied. Even though the Election Commission strongly denied, some voters show the photo of the ballot that they photographed when they vote. Actually, it's illegal to take a photo of the ballots in the election booth. So some people took a picture, and the election commission officers came and then make them clean it, but deleted it. But because it's a smartphone, the photo automatically downloaded to some clouds or something. So they now revive the pictures, and the picture shows that the dates and the place that it was taken. So it was out on the internet. So it became clear that there were two ballots. And the second, that unauthorized ballots found during the opening and counting process. Ballots without a proper number or properly processed were found, but the Election Commission officers refused to investigate. In the counting place, some of the watchers claimed that and reported to the officers who were there, and they denied it, and they tried to hide it. So it became a scandal more and more. Many invalid ballots were regarded as valid ones. According to testimony, and many of those ballots were for Moon Jae-in. The third issue is many ballot boxes were not locked when it was they were delivered to the counting stations. So and many other evidence, small evidences like some invalid ballots which was like broken, and then they taped it and make it a valid one, and all these kind of stories came out. And so more and more people claims that it was a fraud election, it was not a right process and valid. In the Republic of Korea's May 9th presidential election, in view of beautifully blooming roses, the media, politicians, and the election commission may have worked together to help a leftist to win. There are three groups of people who file an administrative litigation to the Supreme Court against the frauds in May 9th presidential election. 4,000 of people joined the litigation as the accuser, and the numbers are increasing every day. About 20,000 people have signed the petition, and lots of evidences were sent to the organizations. The Supreme Court has ordered the Election Commission to keep the ballot boxes about 2 weeks ago. So, but we don't know what they're going to decide. But I personally made a series of TV talk shows on the testimony of those who claimed the election fraud. I believe that the nation must investigate reports of the electronic voting fraud and the vote swapping. All 50 major media agencies in Korea, dominated by leftists, announced that Moon Jae-in had an approval rating of 40% throughout the election period. This somehow unbelievably matches exactly the exit surveys and polls. All of us should question how these numbers can be so accurate and so consistent from so many different sources. The potential for voting fraud is just too high to ignore. The Supreme Court will make a decision whether they investigate this issue or dismiss the case. But I expect no matter what the court will decide, the efforts of people to prove the truth will be continued, and it will be a long journey. I strongly believe the truth will win ultimately, so we cannot stop it. Thank you very much. So I'm happy to answer to any questions if you have any.
Aloha and thank you. We have fake news here as well. And President Trump was really successful in exposing it, but nothing happened. There were no repercussions, no one fired, advertising still pours in. Was there any backlash to the fake media issue in South Korea?
Actually, it's a very complicated background in Korea because of the leftists, how they grew up that much. It was started about 30 years ago to change the history of Korea. They changed the perception or understand of the Korean recent history to justify the North Korean regime. That was done by the pro-North Korean people, the groups in South Korea. And the influence of those really make the young generation people who are mostly comfortable to use the internet media and all the IT and the SNS and things. So it's generally, literally, those internet medias and SNS is occupied by the leftists and young generations. So it is very difficult to change the trends in the SNS and to change the fake news because all the media, unbelievably, 100% the media is on the same side. I think it's because the key journalists in each medias are all lefties, and they are in. I explained why, but it's along the background, and the effort is very minor to fight back to all this fake news. Is it satisfactory?
Well, thank you. Okay, we have time for 2 more questions.
Hello, thank you. So my first question is, I don't know if I caught this during your time up there, but how do you propose how do you propose to
Would you
solve
please
the media
speak
issue?
up a little bit?
Wait, sorry. This? Oh, closer. How do you propose to solve the media issue? That's question in short.
What?
How do you propose to solve the media issue, like in terms of?
How to solve?
Yeah.
I think it's the truth. The people should know more about the truth. That's the biggest reason I open my own station and keep saying the stories that the general media doesn't cover. A lot of real stories is hidden by the media purposely and intentionally. So I'm looking for it and then report it to public through the YouTube channels and app channels, and I'm now going to make IPTV channels so that people can watch it in their living room. But so far the efforts of the conservative side and was really minor, because the last couple of leftist governments, after the two leftist governments, the government's support or social support of those kind of cultural and in the media was very limited to, especially to the conservative side. So to rebuild the counterpart to the leftists is the key thing, I think. And let people know more about the true stories.
Oh, can I just ask an additional question? So when you say leftist, you hear that word a lot. Do you discriminate between the term leftist and being pro-North Korean?
What is the justification? I mean, the meaning?
Yeah, the difference. Yeah. Like, is there a difference whenever you use the word leftist and pro-North Korean?
Leftist includes some socialists, which you cannot say that they are pro-North Korean. But there are clearly the pro-North Koreans who follow the North Koreans' policy to make the South Korea as a communist country. There is 3 different the policies that North Korea has kept for the last 6 decades, which is they cancel the South Koreans the law for the national security law, cancel it. And the second is to break the tie between the Republic of Korea and United States. And the third one is that to national what is that? 국정원을 뭐라고 그래야 되죠?
National intelligence.
Yeah, national intelligence agencies. It's the closed national intelligence agencies who mostly working to capture the spies and get information about North Korea. So these 3 key policies is for the North Koreans' purpose to occupy the South Korea. And there are people in South Korea they say the same thing like the North Korean governments. They think it's a democracy because it's freedom of speech. They say that. So the short history of democracy in South Korea make really big confusion among Korean people that how much we can accept the freedom of speech. What is the limit? But the leftists use that concept of democracy or freedom of speech to speak about their ideology, their belief. So I think the pro-North Koreans is the following the North Korean policy, but the leftists, it's a more broad meaning, including pro-North Korean and socialists. There are self-born socialists in South Korea. So it's a broad means, the leftists. But the last, this media coup, which is the overthrowing the government, is done by the whole leftists altogether in the Republic of Korea.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you
Zhang.
very
We
much.
appreciate that. I would love to take more questions, but we are going to stay on schedule, and some of you need a break, so we're going to take a